there's a spectrum of beings, all the way from simple, mechanical machines. You got some thermostats and some cybernetic kind of homeostatic agents like that have a set point, and that, right, when you change the thermostat setting in your house, you're not rewiring your heating system, you're changing the goals of the thermostat, right? So that's awesome. That's a system that lets you make a small change the goals, then it's autonomous after that. It keeps to the temperature. Amazing. Then you've got some learning agents that you can train. And this is why humans knew zero neuroscience for thousands of years, but could train dogs and horses, because you don't need to know what's under the hood if you understand the interface. You understand the rewards and punishments and behavior shaping and so on. And then past that, you've got some humans where there's a lot of autonomy, and you can sort of convince them with reasons, maybe, and whatever's beyond that, right? So you get this whole spectrum. And there's an assumption in biology that, and molecular medicine and so on, that cells are way on the left of that spectrum, that basically they're mechanical machines, and we're going to micromanage the pathways. We're going to rewrite the DNA, and we're going to edit the pathways, protein engineering, all that stuff. All that stuff's great and it's useful, and we used to program that way in the 40s. The way you would program a computer is by pulling wires in and out. That's how you had to program. But the reason that you don't get out your soldering iron and start rewiring your laptop when you want to switch from Outlook to Photoshop or something is because we've learned that some hardware is reprogrammable, and better yet, some of it, and biological material is that way, is it's an agential material. It has agendas, it has learning capacity, it has all kinds of cool internal competencies. And why would you want to micromanage it? You want to take advantage of all these things. And so that's what our group does, is say this issue of where things fit along that spectrum. You can't just have philosophical feelings about it and just say that I assume cells are back here, only brainy animals are up here. Those are all assumptions. If you want to do good science, you can make a hypothesis and see what happens. And what we found is that if you consider that cells and tissues and cell collectives basically can be anywhere along that spectrum, you can take all the tools that are appropriate to that. So we take all the tools from neuroscience, from behavioral science, from cognitive and and psychological science and so on, and you can see if they let you if they let you do better in terms of discovery and therapeutics and so on. And so we've now found that yes, indeed, cells form a collective intelligence. Whereas the neurons in your brain form also a collective intelligence that moves you through three-dimensional space, the cells in the rest of your body, right from the time you're an embryo, form a collective intelligence that thinks not about three-dimensional space, it thinks about your shape. And it tries to solve the problem of, okay, I look like a single cell, I need to look like a giraffe or whatever. How do I navigate that path in that space? And by the way, if somebody cuts the embryo apart, how do I make two twins instead of two half bodies, right? These kinds of things. And so yeah, it turns out that it's a collective intelligence with lots of cool competencies, and we can communicate with it for therapeutics. So the whole point of this is we are now, the way I see it is almost like the SETI project, right? The search for extraterrestrial intelligence. So your goal is to try to figure out something about who you're talking to, and then figure out a language in which you can get across what you want to get across. So we are talking to now we have a lot of advantages here, because these things are not completely alien. We know they eventually turned into brains, and so we know something about neuroscience, and we can work some of that backwards. But the whole point is to understand and to develop the language. How do we tell a collective make an I? At the very beginning, so right around 2000, we were doing this pretty much randomly, because at the time, no one thought that by changing these voltage potentials, you could get coherent changes in anatomy. So everybody said that, well, you'll just get they call it a housekeeping parameter. They said the cells would just die, and you can't, you couldn't do it. So originally we were just poking around to even see if this is true and to see what the range of parameters was. I had a student, she was actually a dental graduate student, Ivy Chen, and I asked her to inject some potassium channels into the cells of an early frog embryo to see what would happen. We had no idea what would happen. And one day, she came to me and she said, look at the embryos. They kind of got some black dots on them. I don't know. So black dots, that's weird. Let's see. So I looked down, I looked through the microscope. I'm like, oh my God, these black dots are eyes. They're eyes all over the embryo. There's like 6 extra eyes. And I said, holy cow. I like, this is it. This is amazing. We changed the voltage. Eyes have dozens of different cell types in a precise organization. We didn't specify any of that. We just injected some potassium channel RNA. The stimulus is very, but again, we know this from neuroscience that you can encode an incredible amount of complex activity in a simple trigger. You can teach a dog or a horse or a human, if I say, yeah, we've won the lottery, you all kinds of stuff would happen on your end. I don't need to, go into all of this, what it all means. Like, it's a simple trigger that will kickstart all kinds of like activity, right? So that's what happened here. And so from then on, it was off to the races to figure out, okay, what are the things we can say? And so since then, we've made, brains and hearts and lots of other kinds of changes. And that's what we're doing now, is trying to crack this code. This is just the beginning of this effort. We don't know the range of what can you say with this code. We don't know the range of it. We know a bunch of things, but we're just beginning to learn it. We don't know whether it's going to be exactly the same in every species. So we don't know, we don't know that. And the other really cool thing is apparently you can call up natural organs, right? And natural shapes, but you can also call up some other weird shapes that don't normally show up during the lifetime of that species, or of any species, in fact. So we've made some weird things that have never existed before, because what I think is happening here, this is ultimately what I think is happening, is that all of these bioelectric patterns are kind of they're kind of pointers or indexes into a massive space. I don't want to say library. You might think library, but library is very static. A library gives this idea that it just kind of sits there. I don't actually think it's static. I think there's a lot of agency that happens on that end. So I don't want to say it's a library, but I do think that what we're looking at is triggers that dip into this competencies, a kind of a pool of competencies, some kind of Platonic space of forms that you can dip into it, and what we're making our interfaces to that space. And when we do this, then you can get different shapes. And so now we're trying to map it out, and that's going to be that's a huge project. We're just at the beginning of it. So Xenobots, basically, here's how you can think about it. Every natural being that you look at, plants, animals, whatever, if you want to ask why do they look this way, why do they have a specific shape or specific behavior, the answer is usually the same. Well, eons of selection. So many years of selection for specific environment, specific circumstances, everything that wasn't really suited died out, and now here you go, here's your frog or whatever. So I wanted to study that plasticity, and I wanted to understand, is that really where all of these things come from? Or, as was my suspicion, and I now, for many reasons, I now think it's correct, is that I don't think evolution makes solutions to specific problems. I think evolution makes problem-solving agents. And it's just that you normally don't get to see that, because under normal circumstances, every acorn makes an oak tree with oak leaves, and every tadpole, egg, every frog egg makes a tadpole and a frog. But I think that what you're actually making there, what evolution really makes, are agents that are capable of solving many different problems. And so we decided to, and so this is in collaboration with Josh Bongard, who's a computer scientist in Vermont, and Doug Blackiston and my group did all the biology for this, and Sam Kriegman did the computational modeling. What we did was we took some epithelial cells off of an early frog embryo. So these things are going to become skin. These cells are just going to become skin. And we sort of took them away from the embryo, and we let them reboot their multicellularity. Like, we put them in a little petri dish. What are you going to do now? There's a bunch of things they could have done. They could have died. They could have crawled away from each other. They could have made a flat monolayer, like a cell culture in a petri dish. Instead, what they did was they got together. They made a little ball. Now, frog embryos usually have cilia. They have these little hairs on their outer surface they kind of rotate and they push the mucus down the bottom, down the body of the frog, and just keeps pathogens from attaching. So normally what happens to these cells is that they pretty much get bullied by the rest of the embryonic cells into having a very boring life. They get signals from these other cells that say, you're going to be the outer covering of this embryo. You're going to sit there quietly and keep the bacteria from latching on. That's it, right? That's their normal fate. But it turns out that if you liberate them from that, not by adding new genes, no weird nanomaterials, no scaffolds, no drugs, just take away the other stuff that's normally bending them in this direction, you find out what they really want to do. And what they really do is they get together into this little ball, the little hairs get organized, and they start to swim. And they use the hairs to row against the water, and they start to swim. So they start swimming around. Then you can ask all sorts of interesting questions. First of all, what else can they do? And this is only limited by our imagination, because who knows? This thing has never existed before. And there's never been any evolutionary pressure to be a good xenobot. There just hasn't been any xenobots. And one thing we found out that they can do, so that's crazy, is if you sprinkle a bunch of skin cells into their environment, what happens is they circle around, by running around like this, they corral these cells into a little pile. Well, the cells are in a gentle medium, just as the original cells were from which we made the original bot. And when that little pile compacts and matures, it makes a new xenobot. And guess what that one does? It runs around and does the same thing and makes the next generation. So, sorry, my voice is going. I've already given a bunch of talks this morning. So what's happening here is that we call this kinematic self-replication. And they have a new way of replicating themselves that, as far as we know, no other creature on Earth does. And it's just, well, where did that come from? It wasn't specifically selected for that. And what else did, so now we're studying their ability to form memories and how they make decisions and all kinds of this, that stuff isn't published yet. But yeah, we're basically studying the behavior, the ecology, the physiology of this new creature. And then, so there was that. And then, so that plasticity starting to tell you that you can explore that space of possibilities that's beyond just like that one point that we normally see when we look at an embryo or something like that. It's the space around it. And then, some people said, well, amphibians are pretty plastic and embryos are very plastic, and so maybe this is just a frog specific thing, and it's just something frog skin does. So I said, okay, well, what's the furthest you can get away from frog embryos? Well, that would be adult humans. And so then we made anthrobots. We took, and this is the work of Gizem Gamushkaya, my PhD student. We developed a protocol for taking cells from adult human donors. They give tracheal biopsy samples, and you can buy those cells from a company, and you take those cells, and sure enough, in a particular environment, they too organize into something we call an anthrobot, which is this little construct that also swims around. And that thing has some crazy capabilities. For example, one thing it knows how to do, if you plate a bunch of human neurons on a dish, and you take a scalpel and you put a big scratch through it, and so that's a wound, right? And you form, it's like a scratch wound assay. You put the anthrobots in there, they run around, they can assemble in that scratch, and they make what she called a super bot, which is like 8 or 10 bots all together. You pick it up 4 days later, what you see is what they've done underneath is they took the two ends of the neural cut and they've healed it together. They induce a healing of your nerve. Now, who would have thought that your tracheal cells, which sit there quiet for however long, that if they were to be taken out, they would be able to assemble into this self-motile little thing that can also run around and heal your neuron, peripheral innervation wounds. We would have never known that, right? So the capabilities of all this stuff is, I don't think we have even a tiny percentage of understanding of what the material is capable of. I think there are three major uses of this kind of technology. The first and probably most immediate is useful synthetic living machines. So xenobots for cleaning up the environment and sensing, and reporting toxins and things like that. Anthrobots for in the body repair. So from the patient, right? So taking the patient, making anthrobots from their own cells, not genetically modified, not foreign tissue. So you don't need immunosuppressants. They're your own cells. You know, you don't need to teach them about what the health and disease and cancer and the you know, inflammation. They already, you know, they're already part of your body. They know all that. So so those kinds of things, right? So very specific synthetic living machines. The second, and so that will come soon. I mean, you know, we and I should be transparent here. I have a Josh Bongard and I have a company called Fauna Systems, and we have another company. So Fauna Systems is all about Xenobots. Astonishing Labs is another company that is doing Anthrobot, you know, for cancer, aging, you know, all these kinds of things. So I you know, I have vested interest in this, but I really think that we're going to have a lot of very useful synthetic living machines. That's in the short term. So you know, we're talking a few years. The longer term kind of thing is to use these synthetic life forms as a sandbox to crack the morphogenetic code. Part of it will be bioelectric for sure. Part of it may not be. There may be other components that are not bioelectric. But to learn to communicate to the cells to align our purposes. So for example, if you want a particular organ to be rebuilt, you need to be able to convey your goals as a bioengineer onto the goals of the cells. They need to be convinced. I think trying to force them to do it with like 3D printing and Yamanaka factors and, you know, all those things, like the reprogramming drugs, that's okay for some circumstances, but mostly it's, you know, micromanaging things that are really smart doesn't often go well. You need to get buy-in from the system. You know, I talk about the difference between building a tower out of Legos versus dogs. So if you build a tower out of Legos, the good news is that the Legos stay where you put them, that's it. But the bad news is you have to you have to put exactly every Lego where it goes. And if you break the thing, well, that's it. Like if it not falls over, that's the end of that. Building a tower out of dogs, well, you can't do it the same way right out of the box. You stack them, they will not stay. However, once you train them, there's something cool that happens, which is that if you knock over the tower, they get right back up and you don't even have to be there for it. So what we're dealing with here is not Legos. And I think that getting the buy-in of the cells and making your goals their goals is the way towards really transformative regenerative medicine. I mean, just think about it. We, with the exception of surgery and antibiotics, we have almost no therapeutics that fixes anything. The vast majority of the drugs we take are target symptoms. And in the best case scenario, they prevent the symptoms, but often, but A, when you stop them, everything comes right back because you actually haven't fixed anything. And B, often there's highly differential efficacy, there's differential side effects. And I think it's because the cells are fighting you on it. You're trying to micromanage a complex system. They probably have mechanisms to know that they're being hacked. There's a system from outside that's trying to clamp some pathway somewhere, and they respond. And so I think that using these bots as a platform in which to learn to communicate to cells. I want a bot that's, you know, long like a hot dog and rolls instead of swimming, whatever. How do we make that? And so that's the second thing. The third thing that I think is really important here is, and this is where we get to like wider kind of beyond you know, science and medicine and so on. I think that by making these things, we get closer to what I think is essential for humanity to move forward. I think it's kind of ethics filter on civilizations. It's gonna help us understand diverse intelligence. It's gonna help us understand that beings are you know, recognize minds in unfamiliar guises. And I'm not saying that you know, the Xenobots are sitting there having hopes and dreams of human scale. I'm saying that you know, well, people often will do, you know, they hear these kind of ideas and say, oh, so you mean every rock has these deep thoughts? I'm like, no, you have to scale it proportionally, right? But that doesn't mean it's zero. And what I think it will do is force us, all of these technologies, you know, cyborgs and hybrids and chimeras and all of this kind of stuff will force us to ask ourselves the deep questions. What do I really mean when I say this is real and this is just faking, you know, in the sense of AI, for example? Or what do I mean when I say human? Well, what is that? Am I in love with the DNA? Am I in love with the standard organs that modern Homo sapiens has? Am I like, what do I think is really critical about being human? All of these kinds of questions. And, you know, and how do I recognize unconventional intelligences, and how do I exert, you know, compassion and love to things that are not like me? Right? They're just not. And you know, and how do I expand that light, you know, cognitive light cone? So And so I think that these kind of synthetic things in the long term are a step in that direction. Just to say, so diverse intelligence is an emerging field. I'm certainly not the only person working in it. There are plenty of other people, and the idea is to develop actionable conceptual frameworks to recognize and communicate with these intelligences. So the idea is to not, I mean, there's two ways that people normally go. You've got a very common modern science approach, which is very teleophobic, and it tries to see mind either nowhere at all, as some do, or in brainy primates or mammals or something, and that's it, right? But that's an assumption, that's an assumption that people make. The other way is the kind of more animist thing, where people say there's a spirit under every rock, or the whole universe is a great mind, or the planet is a great mind, and they don't treat it as a hypothesis. They just sort of think that you can say it. And the reason then people get caught up with, do you mean metaphorically, or do you really mean it? So diverse intelligence is all about saying you can't just say this stuff. You have to make it practical and saying, okay, if we assume that this ecosystem is an intelligence, what does that mean for you? What does that enable you to do? Can you learn to talk to it? Can you train it? Can you find out what's wrong with it? Can you get it to report the various issues? It's very practical. And I think the other thing that you brought up, this point where it's uncomfortable for people to drop these old categories, and these old ways of thinking, and that's true. We just need to keep in mind that everything we see here, our own structure, our cognitive architecture, everything was evolved in a very specific environment, and none of it was designed by anybody to be in line with our values, to maximize our wisdom or our happiness or any of that. What biology and evolution likes a lot is good enough to survive. That's it, right? Good enough to survive. And so that means that there's no reason why our ability to detect the mind, we love medium-sized objects moving at medium speeds. If you're too big or too small, or you're going in some crazy frame rate, we can't really recognize you. So our particular focus on it is not special. It's not optimal. It's not objectively better. It's some firmware that we've been given by evolution that enabled us to survive this far. But now that's enough, counting on the cosmic rays to eventually give us something we want. We can do this ourselves now, and we can have a path towards enlarging our understanding, our ability to recognize other beings, and so on. The premise is that once we understand the implications of proper regenerative medicine, is that once we understand how to communicate goals to cells and tissues, we will be able to say, make this normal organ. We'll be able to say, make a slightly better organ, or we'll be able to say, you know what, I want something completely different. And all of that will be possible. So you should be able to have complete control over growth and form. If we knew what we were doing, we could make any kind of embodiment that we wanted. And so now here's where people will say, oh my God, that's scary. And I will just point out that when people say, I don't want to be engineered, let's keep in mind, you've been engineered. You've been engineered for a billion years, but you were engineered by dumb cosmic rays. That's who engineered you. So you've been engineered by random mutations made in DNA with some selection forces and some storms and some geologic upheavals. That's who engineered you. So that process, that horse has left the barn. Not being engineered is not an option. You've been engineered, but it took a billion years because the engineer was poking around and did not really, that engineering does not have your happiness in mind. It does not have, any of your values in mind. It just, as long as you stay alive, good enough. So now when you understand that nothing about us was optimized by a great intelligence that has our well-being at heart, right? That used to be a view, and if you had that view, then you could say, okay, you scientists, like this is it. This is the best of possible worlds, so don't muck it up. That's, and I think that's where a lot of people are still coming from. There's this idea like everything's great. No, don't mess it up. So I just want to point out, I'm not even a clinician, but I get emails every day. My inbox is full of them, from the most unbelievable biomedical suffering that's out there, right? I mean, people, my kid had a birth defect. I have a spinal cord break. Just the most, you can't even imagine the most incredible thing. So things are not fine. This embodiment that you get dumped into on this planet, maybe you have a nice healthy body, but almost certainly you don't. And then you're going to get all kinds of other things are going to happen with age or accident. And by the way, you're limited to some particular IQ range that is a little bit extendable with education and whatnot. But overall, you got some limits. Who's had any of this was something we had to tolerate. This is not anything that was created for a reason. This is just where evolution has left us. And do we do we really not think that we can do better than random? Because right now it's random. And I don't mean exactly random, but there is no evidence that I know of that any of this is happening to optimize any of the good things that we like. And so I think that now we can finally take over some of the responsibility for this. And I think that this tendency for people to say, let's not mess with it. Well, doing nothing is also taking an action. Right? It's also a choice. I think it's incredible moral cowardice. It's usually done by young, healthy people who say, all right, don't mess it up. By the time they're a little older and their kid needs something, off they go to the hospital, praying like hell that somebody figured something out. So I think that we just need to bite the bullet on this idea that this is just where we were dropped off by evolution, where at the time that we figured out that, hey, actually we can actually take some responsibility for this and help not just people, but all sentient beings on the planet. And yeah, are we going to mess some of it up? No doubt, absolutely. But none of that is an excuse to do nothing and to leave all these people and other creatures who really they're having a terrible embodiment. And why should they stick with it? We should all be working towards freedom of embodiment. And and you can just imagine, these when people say natural, I mean, what does that mean? We'll say, well, you could potentially you could have a much larger IQ and say, oh my God, that's scary. Well, who said that your current IQ is the optimal level? If you came into a planet and everybody was at the IQ of 50, would you not think that, yeah, it'd be pretty cool, but why is the current level this magical level? Who said that's where it has to stay? So I think that's just important to understand that none of this is somehow set at some kind of optimum, and that we're edging into some danger zone. All of it was just good enough, and I think we can do better than just good enough. It's an amazing process. I've never done anything like this before. It's been really interesting because I think fundamentally a lot of the things we're dealing with are not just scientific issues. They are profound. I don't even know how to the vocabulary, but they're the kinds of things that people deal with in the humanities. They're big existential questions. What are we? What are our opportunities? What are our responsibilities to each other? All this kind of stuff is brought up pretty starkly by the science. And so I am always looking for new ways to communicate these things and the positive implications of some of this work to people, not just for, okay, we're all going to have regenerative medicine and be cured. There's that, but the meaning of crisis, the crisis of meaning stuff, right? This idea that just because I'll give you a simple example. I'll come back to the theater. The play Ex Machina, the movie rather, Ex Machina. So one of the things, so the guy, there's a scene there, and then there's plenty of science fiction that had this before. There's the guy is standing there, and he's so freaked out about dealing with this artificial being that he starts cutting his arm to see if he's a robot too. Right now think about what this means. So let's say he cuts his arm and he finds cogs and gears. Okay. We know what's going to happen. He's the reason he's doing it is because he's super worried about it, right? He's very upset that my God, what if I'm a robot? Now, that means that our educational system and our social, system in general has so beaten into people this idea that they know what cogs and gears can do, that he's willing to, upon seeing those cogs and gears, he's willing to negate all of his personal experience as an agential being with dreams and responsibilities and whatever, and say, oh man, I guess none of that was real, because we all know cogs and gears can't do that. What do you actually know about cogs and gears? You don't know anything about what cogs and gears can do. And right, but you do know what you can do, and you know what you've been doing, and so on. And so the very fact that I think most people would have given up at that point their own personal experience of agency and humanity in favor of a story about matter suggests to me that we've really done the public a disservice through the way that we make it seem like science has made it seem like we understand what matter does. It's very limited. And by the time you find out that, I mean, it's not cogs and gears, but guess what? If you're made of proteins, why isn't that upsetting? That should be equally upsetting. And it is to a lot of people, right? A lot of people who find out that, oh my God, I actually know what's inside. Well, now what do I do? Yeah, well, there had to be something inside no matter what, right? You knew there was going to be something in there. Let's not worry about what that is. Don't devalue what you know about yourself and others. Elevate the story of what it turns out that matter can be. So in a better world, he would have seen the cogs and gears and gone, huh, amazing. I guess cogs and gears can, can give rise to my incredible, mind and imagination. Good. That's the lesson you should have learned, but almost nobody initially will take that interpretation. So I think that what I'm really excited about, so normally, what do? I go on, shows and I sort of talk about this stuff, but that's all I can do. But in collaboration, I think we can bring some of these ideas to an entirely different audience who it's an entirely different medium. Like I'm very excited at using this medium to reach people that I normally don't reach, and try to develop new ways to get the positive implications of these views out into the public, because there's too much unwarranted negativity that people are inferring from the scientific story because it's not been told the right way.